Hello, everybody. How are we doing? Welcome to Beyond Screens. My name is Alistair Aitchison, and with me, as always, is my co-host Tatiana. Tatiana, how are you doing?
Yeah, great. You?
Fantastic. I am also doing great, enjoying the lovely fresh autumn air and enjoying all the wonderful interviews we've been having on this show. So, this is the Alternative Controller Show, where we interview the creators of games that use strange and unusual custom-made interfaces. For example, a game might be played using a door stopper, or maybe an electric guitar, or perhaps even a paper shredder. Or maybe the creator will build a totally new object made by soldering together electronic components. We are in the run-up to the 2022 IndieCade Festival, and in celebration of that, we're hosting interviews with this year's finalists. Tonight, we have the pleasure to introduce to you the wonderful TIKATMOS, and not just one, we've got 3 members of its development team. We've got Matt Bethencourt, Zaina Sheikh, and Danny Rankin returns to help control all the wonderful technology you're going to see this evening. So these 3 people all work together as part of Mouse and the Billionaire, and also as part of the What Lab at University of Colorado Boulder. TIKATMOS is nominated in the live action category for this year's festival. It's a voice-directed game about managing an outer space mall for all the inanimate objects that have fled the dying planet Earth. It's played on a beautiful custom-made cabinet, complete with a crank handle, Etch-a-Sketch style pad, and a receptionist style microphone. Before we welcome Matt, Zaina, and Danny to the screen, let's see the game in action. This is TIKATMOS. So Matt, Zaina, Danny, welcome to the stream. How are you doing?
Real good.
Hello.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Oh, it's fantastic to have you here. Thank you very much for coming along. And how is it? Because you're out, so you're not all in Colorado at the moment, is that right?
Yeah, not anymore. So I have left CU Boulder and the Wet Lab, and I'm now up in Montreal.
Wow.
So sad. We miss you.
And Zaina and Danny, you are broadcasting live from the What Lab at the university right now. Is that correct?
That is absolutely right. Yeah, we're here in the lab, surrounded by all the various stages of chaos that that we've just cropped out of frame.
This is true.
That's excellent. I mean, I feel like that's the skill we've all kind of developed over the past couple of years, is how to hide the chaos to the sides of the screen and behind the camera.
Yeah, for sure.
So, first of all, congratulations on the nomination for the award. It's it's a really fantastic game. We've been watching the trailer, we've been reading up on your submission, and it sounds absolutely fascinating. Could you tell us about what is TIKATMOS?
Yeah, so TIKATMOS stands for the Information Kiosk at the Mall of Space. And basically the idea that we started with was kind of how can we use voice control in a way, at the very, very beginning, it was like, how can we use voice control in a way in which we're helping people? Like so many of like these kind of voice control games, it's about like ordering people around. But instead, like, how can we make it more about a helpful situation? And so we're trying to figure out where that would happen. And then what we thought of was this idea of everything on the earth, all the humans on the earth have died, and everything else has become sentient and then has left the planet on a spaceship and is now traveling around, but they still have needs. So there's a mall there, and you are the one who is there answering all their questions and helping them kind of navigate things, whether it's shopping or finding their loved ones or doing whatever they're doing. So that's kind of the main role of the game.
Wow, that's fascinating. And of course, you built the custom-made kiosk specifically for this. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
So what is?
So it's got.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the idea was, when it's done in person, the idea is that you are sitting down at the actual information kiosk, and you are then taking the role as the person, which is Zaina will be our information kiosk runner today. But you are sitting there, and you have a large, you can't see because they're facing it, but there's a large monitor that's turned on its side that acts as the window. And so creatures come up to the window and make their requests to you. And then you have a little device that's your little kind of interaction with them. And so you have to use the device to find the information that they need, to tune into their languages, because obviously like a toaster doesn't have the same language as a stuffed bear.
Obviously.
So you have to tune into the specific language, makes sense, right? So then you're actually sitting there, and then there's a little microphone. So there's all the things that would actually be with you at the kiosk if you're building it in the actual installation setting.
Right. And so Zaina, because you and Matt worked on this, and there was a team of 4 other people, is that right, working with you on the project?
I think it was a total of 5 people, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and what was everyone doing on the team?
Matt was our fearless leader, project manager extraordinaire, game designer, game developer, really putting all the pieces together. Thank you, Matt, for all of your work. And then the rest of us took up different roles with regarding to the physical installation, developing the interfaces, designing like what the experiences would be like, doing the sound, doing the art, sort of all of the regular pieces that go into game design, plus all the things that go into alternative controls.
Yeah, so there's basically a handful of folks working in a lot of areas of it, but yeah. Everything from the building of the hardware and programming it to the design of the music, which is sort of a customizable element via the controller, along with a lot of backend programming for all the different things that the controller does. It'll make more sense probably when we demo it.
This is true.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, I came kind of with the idea of the nugget of the idea when we first started, but definitely also there was a very collaborative space too for the game design. So every week we would get together, and there'd be a lot of like discussion about like, well, what does this mean, and pushing on things and trying to figure out what the world building would be like and what the story is, and what obviously the visual element. Zaina had a huge hand in what the visual element looks like. So I'll have to say that there's a lot of people involved in the actual kind of moving it all forward.
Right. Well, I mean, on the subject of having a go at it, maybe this is a good place for us to kick off. I mean, would you be able to show us the game in action, and maybe because we talked about using yourselves as our surrogates, that we might be able to have a go at it? Is that possible?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Get it running here.
Excellent.
So the 3 main visuals that you're seeing now are the interface screen, which is that aqua kind of spinning one. The window into the mall, which is the information kiosk as though you're looking out of it. And then the last one is the physical installation. So this is us here at the wet lab.
So, yeah. And this basically this controller, if we were looking at it, that screen that you're seeing above it is functionally what's in the sort of like display of this box. But we've had to basically route it to here, so it's better this way anyway. You'll see more of it.
Yeah. But we get a great view of the kiosk from here, and I can see the crank handle on the side, and on those 2 there's a red knob and a green knob.
Yep.
And this yellow knob here, which will
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And then a button as well in the center.
Right. So imagine we've just walked into the space, we're seeing this for the first time. What do we do? Is it up to us should we be telling you what we think you should play with, or do you have an idea for how you want to guide us through it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can kind of, the big thing about the sort of mystery of the interface, I think, is that you can just sort of step up to it and start turning the knobs and dials to see what you want, but Pretty soon, I'm pretty sure somebody's going to come up to the kiosk.
Mhm.
And when that happens, that'll be a point where we can actually kind of go through an interaction. If you want to give it a try,
Okay.
we'll wait and see if we get,
Yeah.
let's see.
Oh,
Okay, so yeah, we have a customer that's come in.
cool. So the text is a little bit small on my screen, so you might need
Yeah,
to
yeah.
read it out for us.
Yeah, it says customer request received. Please tune translator on assistance device to continue. So if we
Right.
sort of flip through these,
Oh, yeah.
this is the assistance screen.
This is how we tune into the different languages so that we can actually help someone at our
wow.
information kiosk. So
Okay, so do we need to tune in to the bear's language before we can talk to it?
Exactly, yeah.
yep.
Right.
So as we're watching this, you can kind of adjust these knobs, and you'll notice there's visual and audio feedback both.
Oh, and the crank handle. So is that slowing down the frequency as well?
Yeah,
So
we
now
get
we
that
can see
green
that
button.
we're
we can-
tuned in.
Ah.
So now the translation is switched to, hey, yo, what's the store code for the Build-A-Bear gym? So at this point, we need to switch to figure out what the store code is. Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
So if we switch to the directory, then you'll hold down
Oh,
the
also
translator.
before we get going, you'll notice that Zaina did a really good job
Oh, you
here and designed all of the. There's a whole
There
other
we go.
like kind of
Yeah,
language
there you
that's
go.
being used here.
Yeah.
Right. I was going to
So
ask
the
about.
idea being that there's a shared written language that all these beings have, but you, obviously as a human, needs to see it. Or for us, needs to see it in English. So it's a
Yes, this
translation
pops up in
button.
English for us.
So yeah, if we want to translate it, we can do that.
Right. So is that you're holding down the translate button there, or is
Yeah.
yeah?
Mhm.
Let me see. So we're looking for the
So there's the
Build-A-Bear
Build-A-Bear gym.
workshop. Yeah. Oh yeah, I see it. Is it LTA36?
Yeah, it's L1A36. Might be kind
Mhm.
of hard in that size.
That's
yeah.
right. We
So
we
what
are
we-
watching it on a small screen. That's it.
No, it's okay. Like, it's kind of hard to coordinate it. So now what we can do is we can basically speak to the bear through the microphone that we have set up here, which is a little out of frame, but basically we can do it from the computer. And say L1A36. Which I
And
can't
it
believe
says,
that
"Oh,
actually worked on
perfect,
the first try.
thanks."
Usually it doesn't pick me up on the first try. This game hates my
It doesn't
voice.
like Danny
It's
for some
always
reason.
Right.
No, I don't understand what you say, but it actually worked, which is super cool for demos because that never happens. Huzzah.
Well, and there's a lot of
Huzzah.
like as we were building it, there was a lot of thinking about, which is a lot of where the original idea came from, about how like the technology for voice control is not necessarily broken, right? But there's always like little mistakes that happen where they can't understand you, and thinking about like that's actually true. It's just normal communication. And so what would it be like, right? If you're like trying to communicate with something that doesn't speak your language, so through a piece of technology, there's going to be this like broken part. And so a lot of it, we're like kind of relying on the fact that it's a little broken in this to make it kind of part of the story, the fact that it doesn't always work perfectly.
Mhm.
So aside from translating stuff for folks, which people will kind of come in as you're going, this whole kiosk is also meant as sort of just like an idle play thing in some ways.
Mhm.
So some of the other things you might want to do would be to sort of flip through different channels and just sort of see what the knobs do while you're waiting for somebody to come up and ask for help.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Could
And you
change
may have
the-
already seen some of those already.
Could you change the music for them all, give them a little bit different of a vibe?
Yeah, well, let's see. Yeah, so we're just kind of moving around. So like on this screen, for example, you can retune the music a little bit.
Because of course you'd want to be able to change the mall music as the information kiosk person.
If you want
This
to
is
make it a little bit more ballady, you can crank it, slow it down.
Oh yeah.
The other one?
Yeah, it's slower.
There we go.
Yeah.
We can also change it up.
I love that kind of distorted sound that you've got going on there. That sort of like that kind of it's that sort of Starship Enterprise hum in the background is lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Who did
Yeah,
the
so
sound
Andy
design?
Dwala, who did all the Andy Delala, who is a MFA student at CU, did all the music for us, and it's really fun. He's really interested in, as we're doing the game, obviously, this idea of like MallSoft and the kind of music that plays through the mall. And so he's got 2 separate tracks that are happening there. So there's a standard kind of track that you have access to, but then there's also the there's an ambient track in there that you have more granular control with, that he's using PD to control all that through the knobs. So you've got these kind of 2 interweaving things that you have control of, which is really fun.
I see we've got a guest at the kiosk now.
Oh no, barbecue guys here.
Dad Grill.
Dad Grill. All right, so we'll go back to the translator.
So how do you know when you're getting like closer to the right?
Yeah, so the circles there are dark when they're out of phase, and the closer you get to the actual feed, you'll see the waves start to sync up with one another, and also the circles. So we can sort of zone it back out just to see kind of how often you're going different.
And I guess
so now it's, and then if we kind of go back the other way, if you go past.
Yeah.
So we've got it. Oh, almost had it.
Oh, we were close.
There we go. So now he says, "Hello there. Do you know where I might be able to get some briquettes to eat?" Okay. So I don't.
Let's take a look at the directory.
Okay. So we'll go to the directory.
All right.
All right.
We're translated.
So hold on. Go back. I saw something for barbecue up there. Barbecue guys. Does that seem?
They probably have that.
Give it a try.
Okay, so we'll say barbecue guys. What was that? He asked. BBQ guys. BBQ guys. Okay.
Goodbye, I guess.
Bye, I guess. I think we got it.
Okay, so sometimes they're going to ask you for the number code they need to get there, and sometimes they're going to give you something a bit more vague, and you need to figure out. So it's not just, you're not just deciphering the language as kind of like symbol to symbol. You're also translating the language of, here's a vague thing, turn it into something specific. Is that right?
Right, and there are other interactions too. Oh, here we go. So we have another customer request received. So if we go back and retune for Segway Cop here.
All right, let's see if we can get this. That's looking pretty good.
Got it.
Nice. Apparently the Segway Cop's pretty close to the grill. I guess that makes sense.
So it says, hey, have you sent anyone some positive vibes on mood support channel 6 of your IK2000? No one is going to be disappointed that you care. So I guess we can switch to channel 6.
Here we go.
Which I don't know which one that is, but Zaina does.
I do. There we go.
All right. So with this one,
it's a little bit different than the others. This is giving you kind of an overhead view inside of like, you know, part of the mall.
Right.
And
what
so,
is this? Is this the mood support? The mood support channel is what we're watching.
Yeah, that's right. And you can see that little thermometer on the right side is sort of like going up and down depending on if we're getting closer to the person that we're looking for or not. I think it might be.
They're nearby.
They were on the left, I saw them.
They're on the left? Oh, sorry, I missed them. Oh, there they are. They need a little love.
We press the button and that. Good support. And then I can tell the Segway Cop. I press the button. Yes. All right, cool.
We got it, Segway Cop.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Just going back to like the barbecue guys and the grill thing, it was a lot. We had a lot of fun as we were making it, thinking about. Like it became really weird, right? Of like, what is happening? Like, obviously, like things aren't eating other things, but like, what is it? But what are the needs of a barbecue grill, or what are the needs of a toaster, or the needs of all these different creatures that are?
Does the crank do anything for the cat? What happens if we turn the crank on the cat?
It should all. That's all color stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
You can make your own motivational poster.
Right.
Does it refresh? Or is it?
Yeah, if you hit the button, it'll refresh the.
Oh, we have a customer request. Hold on.
Oh.
We have a little.
This
Oh,
is,
very good.
Little blender.
Oh yeah, we do have a blender.
Right. So
What's our cat quote?
Our cat quote is, "I would like to see anyone be able to achieve their dreams," and that's what this organization does. Organization that I don't know.
It's the
Thanks, motivational cat.
it's the mall.
All right, so let's tune Blender in. Oh, pretty far off there. Oh, you got it.
There we go.
Excuse me, is there a bathroom nearby?
Oh, we should look on the map.
If I just say yes? Yes?
Well, the whole point of this, Danny, is to get people to look at the map.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, how do I know what the bathroom is on this map?
So is what we're going through at the moment, is this the kind of, you know, the introductory phase to get people sort of to understand all the basics of the things they can do? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and obviously, like
basically-
as an installation, right? Like it's built to have these kind of like arcs, because you know we imagine that someone's going to sit with it for 5 to 10 minutes, and so there's just these different kind of arcs. So we're just going to look at one arc today,
Yeah,
but there's this idea that like there could be like multiple arcs and storylines that maybe carry over,
I see.
and we would have it set up again as it is an installation mode to like fire those different versions. So if someone came back and they're like, oh hey, last time I talked to a blender and I was asking about the bathroom, you could then be like, oh here, let's give you a different experience that you could try right now.
Right, I see.
Yeah.
Can we crank in on the map?
We tried to, with all the different kind of screens that we knew that we were going to have, we wanted to make sure that the different interactions that you're having would then rely on those screens, so that the little characters are kind of pointing you towards the screens, and the screens are helping you give the information that those characters are looking for as well. So some of that information is spatial, obviously here. So like you need to figure out where you are and where something is in relationship to you, and the character itself, right? But then also like, how do we the story name versus the code and all that, kind of doing these kind of puzzly a little bit, but again, it's about helping. There's a couple times
To the left. There's a bathroom to the left. I don't know what to tell this guy. Go left. Yes.
Oh no.
Danny,
Danny, help this
Say
poor
down,
blender.
say down on the left.
Down on the left. Down on the left. Oh, he doesn't need it anymore.
Oh no, we failed,
We
Danny.
failed.
We failed. Somebody get janitorial
I feel like
services
I
on
was
floor
set up
4.
for a joke right there, but that works out too.
So how did
But it was
you
interesting.
how did you figure out where the bathroom was there?
Yeah,
can
so
you zoom in
Zana
on
just
the-
told me that the WC is at water closet right there.
Can you
Was
zoom in on the water
right.
closet there?
Yeah, that's
You can
it.
kind of
It
see
helps.
it. So
This one. It helps that I've designed this language.
Right.
Zana knows
yes.
the typeface, yeah.
But yeah,
but
this
again,
one,
we got into a situation where we're like, what does a symbol for a bathroom that a blender needs even look like?
right. These are the questions that get brought up in our design meetings.
I see.
Yeah. So let's go through a couple more of the screens. Oh, Danny's jumping the
So I
gun.
just really like the cat. Brave was the man in years, and looking in words, his locks were gray and his courage green. Great poster.
And we
I'd love
didn't,
to be able to print
obviously
these
we knew
out.
that we weren't going to get it set up for IndieCade for an actual installation, but I really wanted to hook up a printer to this so that you can actually then command print out any of the posters that you made and stick them up around the kiosk.
Oh yeah, that would be lovely. Oh, I'd like that.
Really fun.
So some of the other screens we haven't explored thus far is the
Event schedule.
event schedule. So this one has a bunch of different things that are happening at the mall. You could be asked about any of these by people, so you know it's another place that you can get
I worked
information.
so hard on the writing of all these events. Can we at least read the networking event?
Calling all modems for a special networking event. Come connect with others and explore future possibilities.
It's too
Networking
good.
after modems.
I
Come
can't
on.
believe it's not yogurt. What the mall needs now is frozen yogurt, sweet frozen yogurt. It's the only thing that there's just too little of.
All right, what other screens haven't we explored?
Security camera,
Oh yeah, just the cafeteria of the mall.
general
Right.
empty cafeteria because no one eats at the mall. Apparently.
Yeah, I don't know how they do food, I suppose.
I see. So will the cafeteria start to become populated, or is that part of the joke, is that the cafeteria is always going to be empty?
In this build, it's always empty.
Right.
This is true. I'd love to see the Segway mall cop go scrolling by. I think that would be cute. I'm gonna let Matt explain what's going on in this one.
So this is the wishing fountain at the mall, and you are able to collect people's wishes and either approve their wish or deny their wish. So there's two battles. And again, this actually kind of leads into like the kind of design decisions or the goals of the game. Is that initially that started out as Pong. We're like, oh, that'd be really funny if there was like a Pong game that was
It's
into
just
that you
super
could
loud.
play. But it's supposed to be single player, so it doesn't make sense that there's a two-player version of anything happening there.
Sorry, I'm just jamming different tunes.
We're just playing our game. It's cool.
But B, the whole time, every decision they were making was about like stripping away conflict and instead having it be about support. And so anything in which it was, two people against each other felt like it was the wrong decision to make.
There's
So
people here.
instead, let's make it about, let's make it a game
Oh, yeah.
that's like we're actually helping someone at the Pong version there.
I see.
Oh, we got to figure out what these wine glasses want.
Right. It looks like they're out for a party or something.
Those are the Bachelorette champagne fillers.
Right.
We're close. What are you doing, Danny? You're doing a horrible job.
Well, I'm just-
Oh,
That one's good. It's the top one that's bad.
yeah.
Is that this one?
Yeah. No, that
Yeah,
one's.
they're a little.
My
They're
bad.
both wrong.
A little whack.
I had it perfect.
That one's
All right,
good.
there you go.
That's good.
I'm a master
Okay,
tuner.
that one's good. There we go. Easy. Nailed it. Okay.
Boom.
Can you help us? We need to know if there's a game store next to the pianos bar on level 3.
Oh boy.
Right.
Matt?
So this one, yeah, sorry. So this one, now there's like introducing depth in here. So you've got the directory. First of all, you need to look at, try to find pianos bar. So scrolling through to get to pianos bar, finding out what the code is for that, and then going to the map to find that code. And the map is only in the TIKATMOS font, TIKATMOS language, not in.
That's brutal.
Oh yeah, it's super rude.
We're making this so hard right now. Pianos bar, BW88K.
Except
that
what's it
look like?
in the,
It looks
yeah.
like BW88K. I mean, it looks kind of like
Pretty
English.
similar.
Yeah, okay, cool. So level 3.
Let's zoom out a little.
There's a very big toilet
Scroll
on this
over.
level.
Yeah, large toilets. Wait, there it is, BW88K.
Oh, yep, I see it.
Wait. Oh,
On the
there we
left
go.
hand-
All right, now I
yeah.
need to know what's next to that.
Yeah.
What's that one? What's
I-
the one directly next to it?
The one directly next to it looks like the word. It looks like a CIMN.
Is that a K on the end?
Yeah, it's a K on the end.
Oh, you
crap,
can't
I just-
press. You can't do anything to change the level. There we go.
Okay. Yeah. So I
I
can
think
write
that's,
this.
Dana, I think that's your D though. That's a D.
I think it is a D. I think it's DIMNS.
Okay. So go back to the directory.
Let's check this out.
This one's gonna be so hard because there's no. You have to look through every one to find that.
It's true. Is it nearby?
It'd be nice if we had it that you could like change filtering by the
Oh wait, no, it's this one.
code.
Is that UIM? No, it is DIMNS.
We're looking for
Yeah.
a game store, so we should just see where the game
Should we
store
go to
is.
G? Is it at the top?
We're scrolling back up.
I guess, yeah, because there's
We're really
multiple
trying to
ways
help,
you could solve this problem. Is one that you look for a game store and see what's next to it, and the other one is you look for the piano bar and see what's next to that. And I
Yeah.
like that kind of
Gamepad connection.
flexibility.
DIMNK.
Yes,
Yes.
the answer is yes.
Yes, there is.
So
Yes.
yeah. So yeah.
You gotta say yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I'm guessing when you
Trying our
speak
best
into
out
the
here.
microphone, so it's picking up your language, like your words, and it's like guessing the word that you said, kind of like Siri or something. And then what is
Yeah,
it?
it's
Checking that against a list of words at work, or is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
see.
exactly.
Yeah, so we're
it's-
using
there's like
we're using the WIT AI from Facebook, their vocal translation recognition. Partly because we were building on a Mac, and there is
Mhm.
you don't have access to Siri on the Mac. So we could, if we were on the PC, do vocal recognition. But so we're using theirs in the cloud. So it's cloud-based, so it's going off and checking it and then coming back. And then we have a whole like spreadsheet of just the things that it's okay if you say this specific thing.
Right.
And right now it's pretty linear. It's pretty much like, did you say the right thing, and then it moves forward. But there's this possibility space that we got really excited about like, what if you say one thing versus the other thing? What if you give wrong information, right? And so then the bear goes to try to find the Build-A-Bear gem. We could pay attention to like, oh, it knows that you send it the wrong place. So then maybe the bear comes back later and said like, hey, I went and I couldn't find it. Could you try again or something like that?
Yeah.
But right now it's pretty much just like, did you get it right or did you get it wrong? Is all it's looking for.
So when you set this up in an exhibition or something, I mean, what's people's usual path through it? Do they sort of come round and fiddle around with it and eventually they're surprised by something waiting for them? What's the...
Yeah.
I see.
Generally people would walk up and the device itself it's kind of hard to tell from this image, but it's pretty big. So
Right.
it's like, it takes up a lot of space. And so you walk up to it and you're like, oh, this is great. And the knobs feel really good. And the screen is really fun to look at. And so I think you can kind of, play around with it for a while. And then the monitor itself, the window, is also quite large. And so when a character shows up, it's very kind of surprising to say like, oh, there's somebody here needs something. And so then you'll move into the kind of talking to someone phase, away from the kind of playing around with the device phase.
I see. And so the machine itself, I mean, the quality of finish on it looks amazing. How did you go about building it?
So we
Yeah,
have
so the build is, I mean, I can talk about it too if you want, but yeah.
please. Danny's
I mean, it's
hardware.
it's pretty much all MDF. Yeah, the other person worked on it isn't here, but yeah, the build's basically MDF with sort of like a curved bent back, and then that's been infilled with Bondo and sanded up. So the idea was to sort of make it look otherworldly, but still, I mean, I think from the graphics of the game and the style of this, we all have this sort of obsession right now with like 90s futurism, I guess it sort of is, like all things that look like what people thought maybe the future would look like in about like 1989.
Right.
We're also
That was part of the
We're really
development.
influenced by Love Holton, who makes
Yeah.
the, like, boutique synthesizers. That was like a big touch point for us, trying to make these like boutique synthesizer thing, but a game controller.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
like
and-
Soviet era electronics, like computers
Yeah.
and TVs.
But the build's all, there's nothing 3D printed. It's all pretty much just wood components. All these knobs are just wood, and the chassis is MDF that's been sort of all that and sanded up. And there's a lot you can do if you just sand and paint things enough times.
This is true. It really buys into the retro futurism sort of vibe that we were going for. That's sort of like playfully imagining the future.
Mm.
Yeah, and
Well-
I don't know, maybe there's something to be said about it, like it being really like almost childish looking, like a
Right.
little child's play toy, because it's sort of like you are an incompetent Mall of Space employee and you have to use the simplest machine possible to be able to do this, but it's not simple at all. It's
Yeah.
actually really complicated. Yeah.
There's also a lot of this like thinking about like humanity as like an ideal, but obviously failed. Like everything's failed, and that's why all these creatures have left. But
Right.
also there's almost this like infatuation of like, oh, but there were some good things, right? There were things about humanity that was wonderful. There was this technology, or there was these things like the inspirational posters that we've got. It's pulling from like 50,000 quotes. It's like a database of 50,000 quotes, and some of them are so bad, but it kind of, we left them there on purpose with this idea of like, it's like the creatures trying to look at humanity and learn something about what happened as they're floating around in space and moving forward. I don't know, there's a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of
What is
crisis as we
right? Well, and it's like, what does humanity look like from a lens that's like very distant in lots of different ways? So in the very distant future, and a very distant, like from a very distant perspective, like sentient objects. Like, what does that even like imply about humanity, and like how those things were built, or why, or what they are, or how they would see the world.
And I think there is something about where you've set these characters, that they are all inanimate objects, and, you know, where do they want to go when they're in the far-flung reaches of space? They want to go to the mall, which is where you go to get all your inanimate objects and all your plastic tat. It's, you know, there is something kind of nice, you know, everything comes full circle in the end.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're back on our security
Yeah, well,
footage.
Segway cop asked me to check for cleanups in the cafeteria, but there was nothing.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
But with that idea, I think I mentioned before, but with that idea of the mall, like if you go to the directory, like we had a lot of fun trying to figure out like names for stores. Like, yeah, what do things even want at the store, get stores for? So like this idea, what do we have there?
The Gap, Gamepad Connection, G Biotics, General Nutrient Center, Get Lucky Jeans, Go, Goo.
A lot of them ended up being like service for the things. So like apples, instead of apples,
Foreigner Bakery
Apple store is a store for apples. Like they go there and they get whatever an apple needs.
Yeah. I like that. That's really fun. That's really clever. So what?
American Eagles. It's for bald eagles. They go to the store and they get things with them. It was really you just add an S to anything and it became pretty easy to like, oh, that store's just for that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, like, you know, how the team came together for this. I mean, what was it that that brought you all together to work on this project?
So it's really exciting and kind of lucky for me. So I have obviously like my own personal practice, and Danny and I have worked together on a lot of the stuff that was initially going to come from me, but then became this like joint thing between the two of us. But so I was directing the What Lab with Danny at Atlas Institute of CU Boulder, and was an instructor there. I was a teaching professor there, and the institute let me just run a class as if it was a studio for me. And so I kind of pitched it as saying like, hey, I have an idea for a game. Literally my pitch to them was, I have an idea for a game. Let me run a class where I can hire students to make the game, and I'll pitch it to IndieCade.
Right.
They were like, okay, sounds good. And it worked.
Aha! We tricked you all.
So it was a totally different structure where basically, so I did get the students got credit for it, but I got to kind of hand pick and hire students for the class. So I, sought out Zena and sought out these other students to say like, hey, I'm looking for a designer, or I'm looking for a hardware person, or if I'm looking for a sound person to build this team to make this game, do you want to get on this course and run it? And so, so they agreed to let me do that, which was amazing of them to do that. And then, we just ran it as a kind of like a normal studio. So we would do a stand-up every week, get together and see where we're all at, and then everyone would go on their ways and kind of work on things, and then we'd come back every week to work to kind of see where we're at.
All right, this frog is asking me how fast I think you can get to the 6th floor.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do we figure this one out?
Oh, he's just going.
I just said okay. Well, I should be timing it, I guess.
Yeah, come on.
Stopwatch start. Okay.
Here we go.
Is he gonna come back?
No, he's not.
Just never returns.
Oh man,
That's the most accurate information kiosk person experience.
Yeah, like, okay, I'll time you. Yeah.
What
So-
you said about running this as a studio makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's very obviously a huge amount of work for an ALT control game. That's not something we are used to do in ALT control. I'd say even just one of the mini game in this game could be an ALT control, so that's really impressive. But there's something that is even more interesting here for me that makes a lot of sense. So I know your work, especially because we met at the ALT Control GDC, and I used a lot of your work, all of your work. I mean, Danny's, Zaina's, Matt's, in my own research for a concept I call playful essentialization and sensualization. I'm trying. Okay.
Yeah.
You're doing
Anyway,
great.
so thank you. I don't, but thank you anyway. So, but the concept is basically when we try to take an activity, human activity, it can be work, it can be a trope in cinema, and we just essentialize it to its more playful components. So this is what for me Plinko Burger was, for example, which is a game Zaina made with other people, obviously, but during the class, Danny's class, and indirectly Matt's class too at CU Boulder, but also Bicel was a sort of playful essentialization idea of stock trading. And what's interesting here is that this is also a sort of playful essentialization of a fictional job, which is the next step for me. And that's fascinating. Like there is an obvious, maybe I should be a bit clearer for the audience. So what's obvious in the evolution of your work for me is that you're using voice control stuff. You've been doing that for a while now in Please Hold, in Busy Work, even though Busy Work, it was a bit just basic stuff, but that's the obvious evolution. But the less obvious one is how you go deeper and deeper in this concept that I would call playful essentialization. Trying to project this. I remember, I don't know if it was you, Matt, or Danny, you told me that it's like seeing the activity through the eyes of a kid, which is a good way to describe this. I think it can be described too as how we would represent this in a movie, for example. If we need to have a silent scene of stock trading, what would be watching? Guys talking on the phone saying I buy, I sell, whatever. But yeah, this is like really the next step. Like I'm so much looking forward to put this in my PhD, to be honest. But I wonder how you would you could like go further into this. Do you even rationalize all this? Because that's what I'm seeing in your work. But how do you think about all these concepts?
It's interesting. I'll let Matt talk too, but I think that you've kind of hit on this, that we have a fascination with mundane labor in some ways.
Yeah.
And the beginning of it in a lot of ways is sort of saying like, can you make a game of these sort of very banal, sort of very almost boring jobs or menial tasks that are kind of like exploitative of people that do them. And then in this case, it's sort of envisioning more, maybe a less cynical, more idealized sort of, what would this sort of, not quite utopian, but, future weird planet. What parts of that mundane labor are still maintained, and what, can you make strange in order to make the game that much more fun or interesting? And it's meant to sort of both feel familiar and disorienting at the same time, I think. In a lot of ways, it's that.
Yeah, it was an interesting it was like an interesting tightrope to walk, because really and there's a couple of times where we kind of went that way a little bit and had to pull ourselves back, because it would have been really easy, specifically thinking about, busy work, where the whole point of busy work was that you're being bombarded all the time and it feels super frustrating. It feels like you can't ever achieve anything. It's kind of like the point of that game. It would have been really easy to do that in this, right? To have it be like, oh, this is too confusing, and there's all this stuff going on, and then it's a different language, and it's really frustrating. It's really easy to push on that and be silly. but we just kept coming back with this idea of like, we really wanted it to be like, how do you empower the player to feel like they're helping, to feel like even within like a situation in which they might feel a little, for lack of a better word, alien, right? They're feeling a little out of sorts, right? How do you make it where it's still a comforting and a loving, like we really have this idea of like, as game designers, trying to show like love to the player, being like, it's okay, like it's you're working at the job and it's all right, you'll figure it out. And so hopefully all the interactions are trying to like kind of a little be that way in a little bit, and the whole experience should feel comforting rather than like chaotic, which obviously like the busy work version of this wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know people would be shouting at you and getting upset, and here they're just sort of like, I mean, we've ignored this stroller person for a long time, and they don't seem like they're really leaving us at this point. Although we should.
So the stroller one, this would help. This was tied to the calendar, so if you do want to tune in.
Okay, we'll do that. Yeah, this one we need to be cranked.
Yeah, you raised this topic of having less sort of cynicism in this, but I believe, I mean, at least I didn't try it yet, obviously. I'm at a distance. I'm in Paris. If you want to come, you're welcome, but I'm a bit far away. But you actually trade this for something that, I mean, you didn't need to be cynical in a setup that is basically the sort of extinction of humanity anyway. So, and this is the first thing that really struck me when I saw the videos of TIKATMOS. I always want to say TIKATMOS, I'm so sorry. TIKATMOS, is that you managed to do something that as an art designer, I don't know if that's a job, but anyway, it's really hard because there are three vibes here for me. The obvious cute kid-friendly vibe with the shapes and the colors, the mundane of the mall with the music, and yet there is still this disturbing lo-fi vibe coming from the lo-fi music, the scan lines on the videos, the coldness of having always robots, even though they are a bit humanized. And these three different directions points towards a very unique type of atmosphere that is really striking. It's not a question, it's a comment, but that's really hard to achieve. Trying myself to aim at coming from different angles to make something a bit unique, it's really hard to find this balance. I was wondering, for example, for the design of the alphabet, how you chose the shapes, why these shapes. Maybe it was all based on instinct, but I guess there is some reflection here.
Yeah, how did I do this? That is a great question.
It was like a pretty late, I mean, that was...
Well, and it came from this really fun place of...
9 a.m.
Oh yeah, help that stroller. They need help.
Right, so what do we need to do for help the stroller, and then we'll...
I just told her what
time. Oh no, Danny's on it.
I see.
Danny's like just playing the game.
While y'all were talking, I was looking at the schedule. Sorry.
So the stroller was asking... Real quick before, just to explain what just happened, the stroller was asking... about an event that happens at the mall every day. And so if you go to the calendar page, there's a thing called the stroller stroll, where strollers come and they stroll around the mall. And the stroller was asking, and this is also a genius decision, design decision of Zaina's. I just want to point out that the stroller is a mom, and within the stroller are three smaller strollers.
It's a little horrifying.
It's a little... just what it is.
That's wonderful.
But so they're trying to find out. So that happens every day at 9 a.m. And so Danny just told the stroller that happens every day at 9 a.m. So that was the information.
Danny's just filling orders in the background.
I'm just being the actual employee while you guys are talking.
Well, I was going to say
just quickly, Danny, would you be able to give us some different more music in the background while we're...
good.
To talk about the
alphabet. Give Danny a task so he stops playing the game forward.
Before you go any farther, though, I will hijack the screen for 1 second just to show you this one, which was one of the first interface screens that we worked on for like the interfaces for the game. Separate from the idea of the mall, like information kiosk, helping people in that window.
And just real quick so what would happen basically every day, every week, or at least in the beginning, is that we kind of say like, here's a bunch of ideas, and then people would run off and make kind of versions of these ideas. Like, oh, what if there's a thing where you take care of a plant, or what if there's a searching thing, or what if there's a whatever. And so this was one of the first ones that Zana came up with within that kind of those design sprints of the possibilities that we're gonna do.
Yeah, and the language actually developed from, in the bottom corner, it may be kind of small, but it says plant, but then above it, it has some sort of like symbolic, representation of what that may look like in an alien language. And I think actually in the background of the mall, the kiosk with the main kiosk window, and then also in here, like we had started this idea of like, well, if language is present around you in the world as it is in the regular world, like for aliens or for sentient objects that have left Earth after the demise of humans, what does that even look like? And, is there some kind of representation that we can use across the board? And it sort of culminated very towards the end of the project in this full alien language font that, has the same vibe as the rest of the game. And we as, game developers can like put in places and have these interactions with. That sort of just stemmed from a series of conversations over the course of the project.
Yeah, and I think that part of the nice thing about it is that you've also made it analog to regular language, because I think there's a notional kind of concept to going like, oh, it's alien, but once you start to recognize what it is, that you can actually still kind of read it. And we wanted that to be relatively low friction, I think, right?
Yeah.
So that people could be like, I don't understand this, and then eventually be like, oh, actually, I can see the word there when I look at it for long enough.
Right.
I feel like I'm learning another language, even though it's pretty low bar to entry. If it sort of looks like the letters that they actually are. Cool.
Of course, you had a compromise to make between the actual diegesis in which the game is happening, and probably machines could use binary, whatever, electrons, but at some point it has to be playable. So you had some compromise to make choices to make here. Yeah, I get that. That's what's fascinating. Also, I can see that the design of the controller itself is a bit different from the pictures we had from the first submission. What drove so in the first submission, I believe the potential matters were more traditional.
Yeah, they were traditional. Yeah, actually, I just updated the geometers to be a little more alien looking. Actually, that just happened this week. I had a moment of extra time, and I was like, let's make some weird knobs. So I went into the wood shop and made some weird knobs, and the crank needed to be repaired and replaced. So I figured while we were doing that, we might as well keep adding other interfaces, because the idea was to say like, can we make this feel even more alien to the player rather than feeling too much like traditional knobs and dials.
Yeah, but the colors now they make it also look more playful. Primary colors. I assume the usual setup is that so we have the small screen, because people that are discovering the game through this stream may not, we did not explain that, but what we are seeing, the interfaces are in a small screen that is above the potential matters. But then you have another screen that I assume should be in front of the device.
So I'm going to move this camera. This might ruin everything.
Okay.
But, oh boy, behind the scenes.
So up here, this is the mall kiosk screen.
Yeah.
It's kind of the like tall wide screen, and then the shorter screen right now. This one's not running because it's kind of the stream and some cable stuff, but we have it basically hooked up on the computer so you can see it. But normally,
we're hijacking that screen so that it can be on the stream.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
kind of bypassing that there. But yeah, normally the player would just be looking at that control screen that's sort of there, and then then the window screen is this big tall TV screen that we have here as well.
Yeah, in front of the player, like you had for a number cruncher, the same kind of setup for the big
Exactly.
screen.
Yeah. For some reason, we're really into vertical TV sets right now.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Yeah.
Well, we like we really like the like immersion that you would get, where treat the monitor like it's a window, like an actual window. And so we designed it so that it looks like you're sitting at a window, you're sitting at the kiosk. And then again, right, it's not in this version of it, but a built space. So much like BusyWork had that kind of built environment that you're in.
Yeah.
Imagine this, that you have, you know, a pencil holder and like pads of paper and information pertaining to the wall that's, or the mall that's off of screen, as well as the stuff that's on the screen as well. So making that immersive of having that big screen feel like we were excited about that.
So I'm quite curious to know about what, like, you know, what this looked like in its very early versions. I mean, did you come in with a, you know, with an idea of, you know, exactly what you wanted in there, or is it something that kind of developed? And what did, like, the very first version of this concept look like?
Honestly, it's fairly similar to what we were thinking of. I mean, there's like things that happened along the way that definitely pushed it into different directions. So visually, right, Zena had these visual mock-ups early on that really had an influence on the color palette, the kind of overall vibe, like this kind of Jetsons vibe. It's really, too bad we couldn't show these, but if in our documentation, you see these like early versions that Zena had of like almost like a stand-up arcade cabinet version of what that could look like. But I
with like a film reel and
I had in my head right away this idea of a device that's there. This ended up becoming somewhat different than what I was like. I really wanted something that was on like on a lamp arm that you could move around. And we had some ideas about it even having like a accelerometer in there. So like maybe there's something where you could turn things and make things happen on the mall, but obviously more complicated to do that. But other than that, like we knew that we wanted this kind of like Soviet era technology vibe, the Love Holton stuff, and we knew that we wanted this kind of retro futuristic version of what space travel looks like for these creatures. So all that kind of was in there. But then the smaller decisions about the kind of micro games just kind of happened along the way. Like someone would show up and say like, hey, what if we do this? I'm like, yeah, let's try it for a week and see what happens. And part of the fun about this, right, is that having the device with the multiple channels, it was pretty easy to say like, all right, let's just throw that in there. And if it works, and then if not, we can kind of rethink it.
Yeah, in layers as well for the individual interface screens, like sort of building towards the idea of having all of these options. But, you know, we probably started out with a list that included a map and a directory and, you know, this weird plant game. And that's where we, you know, had just like a nugget to start from with regards to those interface screens that we just ran with. Some later additions like the wishing well fountain, where you're granting wishes that are like, you know, from the coins people throw in the fountain in a mall, like, you know, building into those more layered mall experiences that fit sort of in the same vibe.
Yeah, some of that also is that question of like, once you've sort of locked yourself into a control interface, like in this case where you're like, well, we got 2 knobs, a button, and a crank. What do you want to do with 2 knobs, a button, and a crank? And then
that very much
had that shape. Yeah,
we knew at one point we had this kind of brainstorming session of like, what are the inputs? And we knew we're like, we want a crank. There's going to be a crank. And so then a lot of the like smaller micro game decisions became like, well, what would you do with a crank? What would be a way that you could use a crank in a game? Yeah, so like we really like tried to constrain ourselves with the inputs to then say like what games can come out of those constrained inputs.
I see.
There's a couple times I wish we had a second button. I was like, we had a second button.
Just the one.
That's a little tricky.
But it is interesting. I mean, I was talking to Jonah Warren, who's the creator of one of the other finalists' sculpting game called Choppy Copies, and we were talking about constraints being a very kind of important, you know, creative thing. You know, in his game, it's you have to make a sculpture in a very short period of time, and that the time constraint causes you to be creative. And I guess, you know, we're all creative people here, and I guess we all find, like, in our own work that it often shines its best when we have some kind of limitation. Like, you know, these are the set of buttons that we have, these are the set of cranks and knobs that we have. You know, make with that what you can. I find that interesting.
for sure.
Yeah, we're all about constraints at the Wet Lab.
Yeah, and we're
Too
going to
often,
say that
especially
they're
with, like, this-
definitely self-imposed and not imposed by our limits on our skill or
Yeah.
or money.
Or
Yeah.
ability.
Yeah, we definitely do it because we could do it better if we wanted.
Probably.
Well, I'd be quite curious to move on at this point to talking a bit about, you know, the games that you made before this, and you kind of alluded to them, talked about them briefly already. Games like Please Hold and Plinko Burger. Obviously, that's a big part of your obviously you can see the connections between these games. These are games that are made to be played in exhibitions that involve big equipment that you can walk around and stuff. But I'm also quite interested because, Matt, you have a background that involves a lot of music making, a lot of sort of sound creation tools. I'm curious to know if that has had an impact on your kind of how you approached creating this game.
Yeah, what's interesting about the history, I think, of these, so I think of these, we can go through like the history of, there's like a trajectory of games starting with busy work that kind of leads to here, that I think did this really interesting thing where, like, I had been really interested in sound as an coming at the player, right? So like sound, you're being informed by sound, but a lot of what's happened starting in busy work to here is really the player is the one making the sound, and they're the ones that are putting the sound into the game. And part of that is like there's a technical limitation that where it starts. So at the very beginning with busy work started just because we thought like, oh, it'd be really funny if you pound a bunch of keys and emails get automatically typed. Where would you do that? Well, you do that in an office. And so an office has phones. And so then I just went to eBay and was like, here, I can get 12 phones. Let's figure out what kind of game we can make with that. But as that was like the start of this kind of cycle, you know, all we could get out of that was just a single button press. Like you pick up the handle of the phone, it knows that you've done that. There's nothing else that's happening there. And that's all we cared about. But the player is still making all of this noise, right? Like you're telling the player, like when you pick up the phone, you need to say something, even though the game itself does not care if you actually say it, right? So people would play it and they'd pick up the phone and immediately hang up the phone or whatever.
I was there in IndieCade 2017 and I did that instinctively every time, even though eventually I picked it up and said, I don't need to say anything, and put it down. But I needed to say something. It felt weird if I didn't.
And you have some
yeah,
people
I think
who
that's.
some people would want to do it and some people wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I remember running it when we ran it at IndieCade EU in Paris, and it was such a different experience because like people were sort of like so much more timid about it. I think like we were parodying an American version of Office Work, and it became this like, you know, what do I do? And people there, I think in the EU, when we were in Paris, actually would like read the script and like very carefully think about what they were saying because they wanted to make sure they were sort of like addressing the game the way it wanted to be addressed. But then you'd have the rogue person who would just be like, and like slam the phone down or whatever.
Or we had one of my favorites of all time was when we ran it at XOXO in Portland, which is the last time that we ran it. Danny and I were out there for that. I remember one time there was a guy who was sitting on the desk that had a CD player, and he put a CD in the CD player, put on the headphones, went back and put his feet up on the desk, and then just did that for the entire time. Like that was his way of playing the game. Was like, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to, if I was at work, this is what I would do. And you're like, you still did it right. Like that's, you play the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's another beauty of alternative control too, right? Is that it provides just enough scaffolding of imagination that players can kind of approach it however they want. And in some ways that opens you up to them playing it quote unquote the wrong way, right? But even that is interesting to me too, right? Is when they're like, I'm going to play this the wrong way because it's and I'm like, there is no wrong way to play. If you're playing it, you're playing the game, it's being played. But yeah, it's fun to see how much more people get into that when there's actual physical things. It sort of takes away the like, no, a button has to be pushed, but a phone, I don't know. Does it get yelled at? Do you shake it? Do you smash the keypad?
it takes the focus away from like winning or, you know, succeeding, and more about like experiencing and playing. And that's definitely a space in which we do more exploring.
Yeah, we started kind of moving away from like even, I mean, I still think that they're games, especially as like there's gamey stuff about all this, but I started for myself referring to them all as embodied play, right? It's more about like we're setting up these experiences for play, and some of them there's the big win conditions, but a lot of the times it's just like a delight in the thing that's created that you get to experience it for a little bit. To me is more compelling than trying to create like winnable situations.
Yeah. So you're talking about the trajectory there. So, you know, and obviously I feel like the trajectory starts with busy work, and you're talking about how you'd put in all of these actions where, you know, they're really just there for a reason for the player to make a lot of noise. Did I understand that correctly? So how does
and also like the trajectory.
Yes,
also the trajectory is actually the hardware. So right, so BusyWork's the first thing where Danny at the time was a grad student with me, I think, or maybe right after, but like we started working together, and that's when he started doing kind of hardware with me on these. And so the very first thing was like, can you just make this, give me a button press? But now that we have all these phones, oh, now what else can we do with these? Well, what if it also understands when you actually hit the numbers? And so then that's where, so it becomes this like technology, this trajectory of technology. So that's
it's a really nice way of saying I didn't know how to do anything other than turn something on and off when we started.
Everybody's got to start somewhere.
The question becomes like, if we get key presses, if we can understand like what you've hit a key, well then what kind of experience or game can we make out of that? And so then that's where Please Hold comes from, where it's like, oh, now the player has the agency to be able to listen to something and then hit buttons to make decisions. And that one is actually an outlier in this, as far as the speaking, in which you don't speak in that one at all, because we're not doing any vocal recognition. It's more of just like the hardware for the phone and playing with the phone. And then from there, saying like, okay, well now we've done key presses, and we know when you pick it up down the handset, is there any kind of vocal input from the player that we can get? And initially the version of buy sell had that. I was using vocal recognition to see like, or have you said buy or have you said sell? But then we realized like, oh, we can actually just pull that out. We can strip it out and just use volume. Has the player yelled? And if they've yelled, then we can move forward with that. Just because we were trying to do it with 3 phones and getting 3 different types of vocal recognition happening at the same time, we couldn't get it to work right. And so instead making it be just the volume. And that's only coming from the hardware side, like just the Arduino that Danny programmed it for. It's just saying like, did you get to a certain volume on that microphone? You know, hit out a key press for that. So it made it really easy. And then that moving then into here, saying like, okay, so now we've got these key presses, let's make it something where you can actually do vocal recognition. And then, you know, Zeno did the Plinko burger for Danny's class the semester before I kind of pitched this project. And so knowing like, all right, here's someone who's already done this. We know that we can get it working. That's great. Let's bring her on the team. It's something we can know we can move forward with something that's using vocal recognition. And then we were also like, we're tired of phones. Can we make it that's not a phone?
Yeah, we did a lot of phones.
Yeah. Really explored the phone space.
I have so many phones in here. Like there's just bins of phones. I mean, behind us, see, there's all of these. There's what, 1, 2, 3, 6 phones on the shelf back there, and that's just like there's 2 buckets of them in there. There's just a lot. If anybody needs out there, if you're an alt control maker and you need a phone,
we have a lot of them
on the phone. Yeah,
those phones don't work though.
Pick up the phone.
Yeah.
You will.
And so talking
You
about,
still have
go ahead.
you still have some overwhelming interfaces though, like in Busy Work it was coming from the traditional computer UIs. In Buy Sell, obviously all the aesthetic of a playful type of stock trading. Here it's more sequential though. In Buy Sell it was overwhelming also because it was only on one screen. Now using the sequential type of forces the player to memorize where is what. So it's actually interesting that you dig really deep into this concept. And I was wondering, this I'm going to say obsession with the mundane is interesting coming from a phone. I mean, it's a mundane object in itself. So it opens new possibilities. It forces you as a designer to wonder what can you do that is understood because it's a mundane object, and yet be surprising in the reaction of the system after you have this interaction. Like as you said, you could shake the phone, but if you ask people to do that, it's going to be really hard to get them to actually do something that is not expected with that. So having this new controller, it's really interesting. But you still have this obsession with interfaces too. I'm
Oh, yeah.
starting to listing your obsessions here. That and the absurd.
Yeah.
The absurd is coming always, like the baby strollers in the stroller.
Mhm.
You have these obsessions too.
It's
That was, so we had actually the pitch, which is kind of funny that you said that. So the pitch, when I showed up at the first class, I was like, I have two ideas. One idea is a voice controlled game in which you are helping people. And so
Helping
we had this
people,
idea of like,
yeah.
what if you were you are at a restaurant of something that you don't know the language of, and you're trying to order the whole, your whole office's lunch based on it, and you're just looking at the things and you're like, yes, that's a thing, and you're just kind of ordering based on pictures. So that was one idea of that. And then the other idea was this idea of I'm obsessed with like interface only games. So making a game in which there's only the interface is the only thing that you're using. And we kind of were like, oh, we could do both of those. If we have this like, interface device, now all of a sudden we have two things that we can do simultaneously. And I said, that's too much for one class. And we did it.
And then we were like, we're going to do it anyways. And then we sort of did.
kind of,
Yeah.
we
We finished it up after the class, but
it's looking good. Yeah.
Yeah, and
That's the other fascinating thing here, is that you get to actually not accompany, that's the French translation, accompagner, help your students from the very beginning to like my ALT control classes are usually 1 to maximum 3 weeks once in the 5 years amount of time they have for their game design, game development class. So I unfortunately, it's really hard for me to get them to improve their practice, etc. And that's interesting because I remember Zaina interviewing you last year when you were showing, in March actually, when you were showing Plinko Burger, and you told me your very first ALT control game, as far as you could remember, was a crank controller to play Pong by doing
Controller for the
Danny.
game
I
Pong,
think we have,
which is both a really
we
easy
have
game
10
to
seconds
make.
videos of that. And then you evolved
Yeah.
from that to Plinko Burger, starting to think about the fictional and how to, what I call playfully essentialize this burger. What's the name of this job that you
fast food restaurant.
Yeah, burger.
fast
sort of.
food.
Yeah.
I don't know the name for that. In French, it's a polyvalent partner. So it's just to make it a bit more sexy. Anyway, and now you're working.
Yeah, fast food worker doesn't have the same ring.
Yeah, exactly. It's I mean,
sure.
it sounds better, definitely. And now you're working on TIKATMOS. I mean, it's wonderful seeing the evolution. What can happen when you have time to work with ALT control, actually, and the results you can have. It's, I don't know any other teacher in ALT control that have this amount of this kind of results and this amount of time to develop actually this. I mean, that's an actual, I mean, that's a chance. Obviously, congratulations for making this happen, but also that's a wonderful chance to have this. I'm jealous, envious.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I think just the trajectory of the game development like arc I've had in school and working with Matt and Danny, it's just been really fun to be pushed in like a productive direction while also like being allowed to make weird stuff. Like all of the projects have had such fun like design challenges and parts to them that I've just gotten to like work out and like figure out and find solutions for on my own, but also like in conversation with people who know more about this than I do and can help me through those hurdles.
You're also real good at stuff. So,
Thank you.
We also, I should also say that we were smart and we hired Zaina not only as the lab assistant and forced her to sit in there and hand out games and books, but I also then hired her as the TA for the game design course. So just forced her in the lab and said, stay here for the rest of the semester.
You're gonna do games all the time. That's your new job.
I was like, please, is there more I can do?
Well, and we're also
that's
wonderful. Zaina graduated in the spring and just
it's
still sticking around and helping us out with all these because she's just the best.
I'm an alum.
But so from what I understand, Matt, you're the one who started kind of the What Lab, not alone, of course, but like if you were, I mean, from what I understood, you were Danny's teacher at some point, so you're, let's say, the senior in the team. But what I mean is that did you plan all this like from the get-go? Did you tell yourself, okay, I'm gonna make a lab, it will take me years, but at some point I will conquer the world with ALT control?
So that's a great question. So when they hired me at Atlas, it was kind of in this twofold role. They're like, you do sound and you do games. And so we want to give you some kind of lab space. So initially I had the lab that I had was an all like sound lab. It had like synthesizers and keyboards and all that stuff. And I found it incredibly boring. It was, it's good. And I still, love music, but there wasn't much creation happening. It's kind of more of like, oh, you'll use it if you want to play around with the synthesizers. And the synthesizers are still in that space. Like they still exist in the What Lab. They're off to the side there. But I, in my own practice, had started building sound installations, right? So taking this idea of all the stuff I was excited about with sound and instead trying to put that out into a more installation space. And so it made a lot of sense to then say like, all right, well, let's do playful installations as well and game installations. And so it actually happened after, I believe, Danny can maybe fact check me on this, but we ran our first festival in 2018. It was like a
2018,
festival.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I attended that one.
I then went to the Institute and said, like, I want to make the lab that's the lab of the festival. So the What Festival becomes now the What Lab. And we focus on the same stuff that we're excited about in the festival. We're going to be doing that in the lab as well. And so then the lab really transitioned away from sound and into more gamey stuff.
Okay.
And when you're teaching, do you have are there things that you're, that you particularly like to do as a teacher, like to draw upon? Like what makes good alt control teaching?
I think, really any game design teaching to me like we talked about earlier, is constraint. Like so many of the students are like, I'm going to make Zelda. And you're like, no, you're not. We want you to make something similar. And so constraining. And in fact, Danny teaches a course called Tiny Games that's just saying like, you're not going to make a big game. You're going to make this really small game, and making that, I think the real structure about what you're trying to make is great for that. And then so alt control is another really good version of this, where you're throwing people into a thing that they've never done before, so they can't rely on, oh, I've seen Zelda or I've seen Mario or I've seen all these other things before, and instead it has to come up, there's a new idea that has to emerge because of that.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of it is rooted in kind of novelty, but not just that, but like good alt control, I think most people know it's sort of like hard to define, but you sort of know it when you see it, right? You're sort of like, I can see what's going on here. This is weird. I'm perplexed and intrigued by it. And students, if you let them just sort of pick what game they're going to make, they will inevitably start with games that are a lot like the ones they like already, right? They'll choose the commercial games that they want to model their work after. And if you say, okay, well, what if we forced you to do something different by making you only use this bizarre control interface that you have to make yourself. Those games that they love really a lot of the times cease to be that interesting when you force them to play it with an odd controller, because there's like a challenge that's removed or something new, and then all of a sudden your mind goes, oh, I guess anything could be a controller. And you hope that by the end of a course, that's how the student walks around in the world. They just look at a building and go, probably make the elevator on that building into a controller. They look at their like garbage in a can and they go, yeah, I could probably make this garbage in a trash can into a controller. And that's what you hope, not necessarily even that all the games are great, that students leave with the perspective that possibility space has gotten so much larger. And it helps that alt control is such a diverse array. There's such a nice example set to draw, and you can just sort of say, look at all of these strange and beautiful things. And you don't start them on some of the more abstract stuff. You start them on, you're like a line wobbler, I think is always where I'm like, yeah, look at this game that's kind of like what but it's an odd interface. And then you move along to shredding papers in a shredder with eyeballs on it, or like giant boxes with fur and hair or whatever it is.
Right.
And students really do respond, I think, to being like, oh, I can do something that nobody's ever done in games, which feels really good. And if you're like, I'm gonna make a platformer, you might make a great one, but probably not as good as the people that have been making platformers for 20 years. But you can say, oh, I'm gonna make an alt control game, and people will go, yep, I've never seen anything like that before. It maybe works weird and is broken and terrible, but it definitely is exploring something new, and that's the joy of it, I think.
I think we're also really inspired by the spectacle of arcade as well, right? Like not just like being at your house playing a game, but really having a game in a public situation. I was just thinking, as Danny was talking, like Wine Welder, I was thinking like the game that we played the most when we were at GDC, not in actual GDC, but in San Francisco, was we went to, what's that arcade that we went to? What's it called?
Gold Watch.
Golden Watch.
Gold Watch.
Free Gold Watch.
Free
Gold Watch. And the game that we played the most there was a game where you roll a bowling ball.
Oh, that one.
Over, like try to get it over a hump. Like we played that game more than any other game there.
Yeah.
And it's like there's
quite a spectacle.
Hardly any like technological stuff there.
Yeah.
It's
just that people are standing around going, oh, yeah.
It's rolling up a hill.
But that spectacle of being there, right? And like think that, like kind of the constraint around that game is really beautiful.
Especially in a time where a video game is much more I was about to say isolating practice. Of course, I don't mean like what I mean is in physical spaces, arcades are not what they used to be. Cyber coffee. How do you? Cyber coffee. Cyber cafe. Yeah, that's what we call it. Are not really a thing anymore. We don't have a lot. I mean, of course, there are fun fairs and theme parks, but these are not something that you can do on like. Obviously not daily, but even like it's something you do every 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So we don't really have playful practices that are regular practices at least on a weekly or monthly basis anymore. And there are some stuff with tabletop games. I don't know. I assume it's the same everywhere, but in Paris, at least, there are more and more tabletop game bars opening. So, and some escape rooms, escape games, of course. So there is people want, I mean, I believe, maybe I'm wrong on this, but many people, I believe, want play spaces dedicated to play somehow. We lost this with game consoles and games on computers being more and more not mainstream, but coming inside houses. Of course, the fact that we can play a game just with 2 clicks is wonderful. I mean, people 40 years ago would dream of this, but what we lost socially with this, we didn't gain anything socially from there is nothing that compensate for that. And of course, alt control is a bit niche right now, but I believe there is something to do with alt control. Maybe in 10 years, maybe in 5 years, it will happen that that could be part of a new way to play, like weekly, monthly with people.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
think
If
so.
you have an idea, let me know. I want to be part of
Yeah.
this.
No, I mean, it's
We're
a
making-
matter of like having the people for it. Because I think that what we try to do, I mean, next weekend we're running an arcade here at Atlas, and it's almost all alternative control games, our games and some other games from people around the area. And you know, though I would love to do that more often, but I don't
Yeah.
have any time.
Yeah.
But yeah, this sort of like jam on a strange game. I think there is room for it. People talk about it. Yeah.
I mean, do you see like a future for alternative controls? I mean, obviously what we're doing now is quite niche, it's quite experimental, but I mean, do you have a, you know, what you would like to see the world be like in 10 years time? Or, you know, yeah, I mean, do you?
Yeah, I mean, I my short pitch is that I dream of a world where everybody feels comfortable making the game that they want to play, right? And not just sort of like for commercial purposes, but that games become yet another media for self-expression, right? The making of a game is more interesting to me than the, you know, selling of a game or putting a game on exhibition. That people learn a lot about themselves and the world by creating experiences for other people. And part of the beauty of Alt Control is that you get to shape that in so much more of a personal and fun and kind of surprising way that's really distinct for your culture and to sort of to showcase that. So yeah, I think that I would love it if it was just like you went to a town and you found out what was happening and they're like, oh yeah, there's an Alt Control jam, and everybody just knows that you're going to go and see a bunch of artists that use video games as their paintbrush, so to speak. And you're going to experience something bizarre and kind of fun and a lot of custom sort of DIY sort of space in that. But yeah, it would take a whole groundswell of people just saying, oh yeah, I guess I could make that if I wanted to, which is what it takes.
I think like even more like less focused on like an event, right? Like I like the idea of there being just a constant. Like just like we have murals, like there's always murals around. Someone's like, I'm gonna make a mural. Like the idea that someone's like, I'm gonna make a playful experience and it's just out in the world. That's an interactive playful experience. Like even like I feel like you still get some like photo ops or things that are always happening out there that are these like playful experiences, but making it be more about a kind of gamified playful experience. I think there's space for that to be happening.
Yeah.
The hard thing is the like, we all know this, right? As like alt control designers and builders, like our things just get destroyed so fast. And I can't even imagine leaving it on a street corner. Like, but as like the technology and the art progresses, I can see that actually happening, right? Of being like, how amazing would it be to like hack a payphone where someone walks by and it rings and all of a sudden Please Hold is playing on that phone and someone's like having an interaction that they weren't expecting that day. Like that's like my dream. Like how amazing that would be.
Yeah, there's just weird games hidden in the fabric of the world around us, and that you might just be lucky enough to stumble upon one at some moment.
That is the dream.
What a dream, right?
I love that idea.
Well, this has been an absolutely fantastic discussion. We are unfortunately starting to reach the end of our time, but I mean, one thing I'd like to, ask, before we close is just, what are your, what's next for I almost said it wrong. TIKATMOS.
TIKATMOS.
What is next for TIKATMOS?
Is this the end of the road for TIKATMOS? I don't know if it's continuing.
We're showing it at the What Arcade.
Oh yeah,
What
yeah.
Arcade next week. It's getting shown in person, so people who
If
are
anybody's in Colorado and you want to come to Boulder, it's Saturday at the Atlas Institute, November 5th from 11 to 6, basically.
And then
Super
Zane
casual
and I were
plug.
Zane and I were just talking about if we want to try to pitch it to GDC to see if we can get people in front of it.
Yeah.
We'll see.
It's a
Yeah.
lot of work, guys.
Yeah. That's this is true.
But that would be awesome.
TIKATMOS.
Okay.
I was just gonna say it's come so far. It like from the semester project into its current final form. So who knows? Maybe it could go farther, but I'm pretty proud of where we've gotten it to, honestly.
Are there big lessons that you're going to be taking forwards into future projects then?
As far
That
as
is a good question.
from a development perspective, the like compartmentalized mini game structure around an interesting device was something that I found very exciting to work with, right? Where we kind of knew what the device was going to look like, and then to say like, all right, let's just build a lot of experience, which is kind of we did that for buy sell as well, like knowing like you've got a phone and there's going to be mini games that happen in between. Now all of a sudden the world's your oyster and you can do all sorts of fun stuff. And so I had kind of brought that into this, but that's a space that I'm still really excited about, of like building a thing and then thinking of like, all right, now what are like 15 different games you can make with this one thing. I feel like I'll be doing a lot more of that in future work.
That's fantastic. And of course, like there's TIKATMOS. What's next for TIKATMOS? What's next for each of you? I mean, do you have things coming up? Do you have new projects on the go? Do you have like what does 2020, the rest of 22, start of 23, what's that got in store for you?
So I'm as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm now up in Montreal and just started my PhD here at Concordia University, and so I'm specifically looking at kind of come back around, and I'm looking at sound in games, and so trying to kind of merge the two things, merge the kind of alt control embodied play with a lot of the sonification sound installation stuff that I did before, and so I'm doing kind of a little bit of a with those. So that's what I'm kind of working on right now.
Yeah. And I mean, here and what we're trying to do some interesting residency stuff in the spring. So we'll stay tuned with that. But we're hoping to another big project that's kind of been happening here is this TIKATMOS thing with little cardboard controllers. I think y'all know. So I don't know exactly what sort of things we're looking at, but we also have an alt control studio that's running in the spring that I'm going to be overseeing.
Wow.
And I think that will hopefully turn out some more weird
games. Yeah.
I don't know if we'll have another Zena.
You can always hope.
Yeah. If anybody's out there watching this and they want to hire somebody, you should hire Zena.
I'm already hired.
I mean, you can get paid more.
That's true.
Somebody wants to pay Zena a lot, but she's a great programmer, great designer, and can work remotely so that she can stay here in Boulder and help.
That's true, and help with the lab. Yes, I currently work for a small games company here in Boulder, Sunblink. So I am a junior game designer with them, and doing random stuff when Matt and Danny are like, "Hey, do you want to do random stuff?" So we are the support team.
Zena, make a screen for me right now. That's what we're looking at, is the screen. I just said, we need a standby screen. We need it.
We do. And we've got it. And we have it. Yep.
She delivered.
Well, that's fantastic.
I can't
Tatiana...
wait to see you. Yeah, I can't wait to see you in spring. I mean, I'll be in Colorado and in San Francisco during GDC. So I hope I will be able to play TIKATMOS not once, but twice, actually.
Oh boy. Gotta convince Matt.
So, I mean, this has been, like I said, absolutely fantastic, and it's fascinating, and it's been really lovely to see it, and to be able to see it all in action and see it, you know, how it all functions and everything has been a really, really nice privilege. So thank you very much for sharing it with us. Is there anything that you would like to share with our audience before we head out? Where can we find out more about your work and things like that? What do you suggest?
The What Labs website is what.io/lab.
Is that what with 3 A's?
What with 3
A's?
A's.
WHAAT.io/lab. And then also Mouse and the Billionaire.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll just plug each other. mouseandthebillionaire.com and what.io lab.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I mean, you can find it.
It's true. And I think most of the games are on itch, so check us out there as well. You can play our weird things that probably work without the controllers.
That's right. It's right now. It's on the screen right now, and it's just gone away, but it'll be back in 30 seconds will be the link. We've had it on the screen during the interview. So yes, Matt, Zena, and Danny, thank you so much for coming along. This has been absolutely fantastic. Real pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much for coming. Tatiana, as always, an absolute pleasure hosting the show with you. So just to let you know, audience, that this is not the end of the interviews coming on the Beyond Screen shows. We have yet more interviews coming this way because we are interviewing all the creators of the games that are nominees in this year's festival, which take place beyond the screen. So we've had tabletop games, we had VR games, like alternative controllers, obviously us, escape rooms, and playable theatre. And so in the run-up to the festival, we are, well, not just myself and Tatiana, but also people like Celia, are interviewing the creators of the games that have been nominated for awards this year. Speaking of awards, the awards ceremony will be on Saturday, the 5th of November. And I'm remembering, yes, that is a Saturday, the 5th of November. So please do tune in to this channel for that. And one day before that, on the 4th of November, which is a Friday, the festival will be open. So please do head over to IndieCade.com to find out more about the festival, find out about the nominees, find out about the honorees of the I've forgotten the name of the awards. The honorable worthy awards, like, you know, we've got an interview up on there with Kaho Abe, who is the winner of the Bernie DeKoven Big Fun Award, so that's a really good watch. I highly recommend that, and not just because it's myself and Tatiana hosting it,
but also,
of course. So yes, please do head over to IndieCade.com to find out more and keep an eye on this Twitch channel to see yet more interviews. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming along. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Zaina. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Tatiana. And of course, thank you, everybody at home. Have yourselves a wonderful night. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.